When it comes to valuing a small business or assessing the asking price of a small business listed for sale, I see a lot of buyers making a very big mistake. We'll come back to this listing in a second because it makes a great example of what I'm about to cover here, particularly with regard to this valuation multiple and how I think, in my opinion, it is quite distorted. But let's just start off by looking at some sample data here. And this is sample data reflective of the information on financials that you would get after you sign an NDA and you get the SIM and the packet of information and typically an Excel spreadsheet. And it has the revenue and profit month by month for the business. What a lot of buyers do is, just like the broker that established the asking price, they come in here and they look at the performance over a certain period of time, like 12 months, and they say, okay, the average profit is X, in this case, in the example here, and mind you, this is not real data at all, just made it up for demonstration purposes, is $30,166 per month. Now let's assign a valuation multiple to that based on what we think about the business. And this is a very flawed way of looking at things because, well, A, you are looking at things retroactively, and this is the big problem, not considering what they're going to be going forward. And B, you're kind of assigning a valuation multiple on, what you think the trend is. A lot of brokers will assign the valuation multiple after looking at the data historically, or the profitability historically. They'll assign the valuation multiple higher or lower based on, their hypothetical assessment of the trend. It is very flawed, as you're going to see here when we shift gears and take a look at this listing. What I do, aside from considering the future profitability, is also start by assessing the business model and the quality of the business, and then assigning a valuation multiple or range to that, and then applying that to the future value. Okay, and this is how private equity does it. This is how big money does it. But I know that most small business buyers simply omit the future consideration and don't start by assessing the quality of the business as a whole. They just look at it and they go, oh, yeah, I think this business is worth a 5x multiple on the profitability that it has had. This can really bite you in the ass. So let's go over here and take a look at this business listing. This one is really interesting, okay? We'll start by just considering the business in the business model. This is how I would look at it. And we can see that this one is described as the largest women in tech jobs community, has 150,000 plus members, 78% EBITDA, $302,000 of annual recurring revenue. The total trailing 12 months revenue is $384,000, and the profitability is $257,000. I'm going to say this is on an annual basis because I'm familiar with this broker and how they list things. And they're asking $828,000, which is a 3.2x profit multiple. Okay, not bad at all. But let's consider what the business actually is here. And this is really a community and job board for a particular niche or industry. And it has pretty strong attributes. The margin is very high by small business standards and in line with what you would expect for an online business that has a digital product or service. This is fundamentally a community and job board. I guess we could also call it a marketplace. And I like businesses like this. There's basically no cost of goods sold, and you're bringing people together as a community and effectively creating the marketplace. So you have two audiences or two customers. That is going to be your buyers in the marketplace and your sellers. The sellers going to be the job seekers, buyers going to be the employers, right? You've got them both coming together in one place. And it's very hard to build a community model business like this because you've got to pull in two separate customers. So businesses that achieve that are typically very robust, very Lindy. Let's see if we can find out any other details. It was acquired in 2021, so it's not founder-led at this point. They've got 1,000 to 5,000 customers. We know the annual recurring revenue and a growth rate of negative 47%. Just calling that out right now. You may have already noticed that number higher up on the page. We're going to talk about that. That comes into play. The business model, how they make money is hiring partnerships, B2B, membership, B2C, typical from what I would expect the job board. They have events, B2C and B2B. So they have events, they probably charge people access to come into it, and they charge the businesses to come into it, and they have newsletters. So, I mean, this seems like a really robust business. I like the details here. I fundamentally like the type of business that it is. Now, aside from the annual growth rate, which we're still going to talk about, I would say that this business in a healthy state is a 4 to 5x valuation multiple. 5x might be a little lofty. I think 5x might be, more reserved for, say, a software type of business or something. But still, this, in a healthy state would be a 4x business model. And if we 4x this, that would put the valuation at a little over $1 million. But we know, based on this right here, the 3.2x, that they're not doing that, right? So they're accounting for something, in this case, a substantial decline in growth. This number here cannot be overlooked. And fortunately, this broker gives it to you, but most brokers do not give it to you. You have to tease this information out. So going back here to the revenue and profit numbers that I made, when I get numbers like this, the first thing that I do is I put them on a chart. Right, so in this case, I'm looking at profit. In this chart here is for what we just looked at. I'm looking at profit over the last, not the last 12 months. This is over the entire set of data, 36 months that I made up here. And in this example, it is steady, right? Very, very rarely do you see a line as stable as that. And then I made a growth model here, and we can see this is just the second set of numbers, largely irrelevant. The point I need to make here is that when I get these numbers, the first thing I like to do is make a chart so we can see how things are growing. Make a chart of the revenue and profit. In this case, I've just got profit on there, but here we can spin up another one real quick. Just for talking purposes, and right here it is. Basically a straight line. They never come out like this. If you've ever looked at the numbers, there's big spikes and all that. And the spikes and troughs really reveal something to you too. You want to look at these and go, okay, hey, why did revenue go up but profit was stable in this, month or this quarter, etc. This is a really powerful thing to do. This is usually one of the places where I start. Anyhow, you have to kind of tease out the growth rate by looking at a chart like this. Very rarely does a broker just publish this annual growth rate. But coming back to this, what does this mean for the valuation and how you should consider? Well, if the annual growth rate is declining 47%, that means in the next 12 months, you are going to have 47% less profit, assuming it continues that trend. Now, sellers and brokers are typically going to have a bull case scenario for you and say, okay, well, the growth rate decline is ending. And here's why. All you have to do is, pay $828,000 and the growth rate declines, right? Everything is rainbows and sunshine. But very rarely is that the case. In a lot of cases, the growth rate, continues or gets worse. It very rarely gets better just simply by buying the business. So you have to look at this going forward and say, okay, in the next 12 months after I buy this business, my $257,000 profit doesn't exist anymore. Instead, what I'm going to have is, multiply that by 53% to account for that, where I'm going to have $136,000 of profit. So now, if we assign the valuation multiple of 4 to 5, and assign it to this future profit, the valuation suddenly looks completely different. At 4x, let's just go at 5. But at 5x on the high side, it is $681,000. And notice the difference here, right? At a 5x valuation on future profits, it is still valued substantially lower than the 3.2x valuation multiple that is displayed right here. And, the number only gets worse if we assign a 4x multiple to it. Okay? So the point that I've made here is that this is a very good business model fundamentally, but if you don't consider the value of the business model and the value of the future profitability of the business, you get a very, very, in my opinion, distorted and unrealistically high valuation of the business. Now, if you were to change it around and things were growing, yeah, absolutely. Assign that 4 to 5x valuation to the future growth and the future earnings of the business. Now, let's go into another example here, and let me know if you've ever seen scenarios like this, or if you have been caught off guard in the valuation process or analyzing the asking price of a business. Let me know in the comments below, guys. I'd love to hear from you. And on that note, if you're finding this video helpful and or insightful, you know the drill. Smash that like button to help me out in the YouTube algorithm. Now, the next scenario would be a scenario where, oh, I don't know, let's just make something up. You, as the buyer of the business, are going to have to fill another role. Fill the role of the seller. Let's just say you're going to fill the role of the seller. And what might be something that you have to account for? Oh, you need to budget for changing suppliers because the business, this is kind of a complex scenario, but let's just say a business only has one supplier of the product. And you really need to make sure that you can fulfill the orders going forward with a different supplier. Not necessarily that you need to change suppliers, but you need to account for the risk that you're taking on if the supplier relationship does not continue. And this comes up a lot in e-commerce businesses. Working with a supplier for years, there's no other suppliers that the seller knows of, and it's all just kind of done on a handshake, right? Like they have no contract. The supplier can change prices at any time, right? So you need to, as a buyer, be prepared to make a shift to a new supplier and have one lined up. And maybe you're going to assume that that's going to result in 20% increase in cost of goods sold. Okay, well, in that scenario right here, let's add some more columns to it. And let's just call it future 12 months. Right? In that scenario here, while we've got the last 12 months was averaging basically $30,000 in expenses here, or $30,000 in profitability. In the future scenario with you as the new owner, let's just say that you're going to have an increase to your cost of goods of, I don't know, based on the budget, in your estimates, $4,000. So this number here is going to be essentially $30,000 minus $4,000 per month. And then the seller is just working a ton of hours in the business. You're going to have to step in and replace him. And let's just say that that is worth $8,000 a month. Quick word on the seller, involvement. In some small businesses, it's kind of implied that the seller is going to have a full-time job going into it. I don't really subscribe to the, oh, you're buying a job, not a business, so it's not worth anything. No, that's, not really the case. And maybe full-time accountability of the salary is not really representative. Sometimes that's factored into the valuation multiple. That's another argument that you could make and, I may make. But anyways, let's just say that in this case here, you're assigning an $8,000 valuation to, adjust for labor in the business, right? This business now, over the next 12 months, what would I do? Actually, since we're looking at things on a multiple basis, or on a monthly basis here in these numbers, let's just say that the monthly valuation was based on that $30,000 number. Now it's only $18,000. So you have to consider the overall business model and then assign it to the future valuation or the future stream of cash flow, and the valuation ultimately looks lower. I think that was a kind of poor example. Maybe I didn't do the best job explaining it. Let me know if that made sense in the comments. Let's just shift gears real quick and look at two other examples. Mind you, I am not very familiar with these listings. I actually just kind of skimmed over them from what we can see on the screen here, and they looked interesting. So I figured we could pull them out and talk about them in the context of this model right here and what I'm talking about. This business is a high margin auto parts drop shipping business made in the US, preferred pricing from the supplier, requires only 10 to 15 hours per week of owner involvement, been around since 2018, products are made in the US, drop ship. I'm trying to see if the business has any other distributors. Oh, this is interesting. They are a top seller for many of their distributors. So they have multiple distributors. I think that is a strong attribute for a dropship business. So dropship businesses, I typically would say, would be at a, say, 24 to 40 month valuation or 2 to 3.5x annual profitability. All right. What are they asking for this business? That's 875 divided by 277. Before I actually click on that, click the calculate on that and see the valuation multiple, I gave a range there of, say, 2 to 3.5x. On the high side of things, they would be more valuable or valued on the higher side of things if they have multiple suppliers, have been in business for a substantial period of time, have some good volume, and have healthy margins. This business has close to a 25% margin. That's pretty good. I would say this is very healthy. I'd expect this to be valued on the high side of a drop shipping business. So let's just calculate it. And here they have it calculated at 3.15. I'd say this is a pretty fair valuation. And obviously somebody else agrees with me, as this one is sale pending, and it hasn't been for sale for very long. I think it's came onto the market within the last month. Hence why I haven't found it yet. I haven't really been too proactive in staying on top of the online businesses that were recently listed for sale. And on that note, quick plug here. If you want to stay on top of them with me, I have a newsletter where I send out online businesses that were recently listed for sale with a focus on established, profitable, and time-tested businesses. That is Acumen Wire. I'll put a link below to acumenwire.com. You can head on over there and get signed up. All right, before calling it a wrap, I just wanted to come back to the spreadsheet because I can't stress enough the value or importance, like mandatory need, to make an offer or value a business based on the future profitability of the business. I've seen many examples and scenarios where people come into a business and they simply are just like, oh yeah, stream of profit, this is what it was for this period of time, here's my multiple, boom, and then they get into it only to realize things are declining and or they've incurred further expenses that they didn't even think about. And in my experience, the best place to start is simply right here by making one of these little line graphs of the revenue and profitability, and in some cases I'll put the gross profit on here as well, for the historical financial data, all that you have, so you get a solid understanding of the revenue and profitability trend. And also in looking at the graph, you can see the volatility in it. I think this is very, very helpful. So yeah, if you're out there and you are considering acquiring a small online business, always, always, always base your offer and valuation on the future profitability. I am calling it a wrap and signing off on that note. If you found this video helpful and insightful, you know the drill. Smash that like button to help me out in the YouTube algorithm.